Welcome to Revealed Riches. I'm your narrator, and tonight I'm going to reveal a story that proves not all the money in the world can buy integrity, not all luxury can hide betrayal, and not every fall is permanent. Imagine a $5 million birthday party, a 400-foot yacht floating in the crystal waters of Monaco, champagne that costs more than luxury cars, celebrities, billionaires, the global elite gathered to celebrate a man who thought he had conquered the world. But on that June night in 2023, Marcus Thornfield would discover that building a $2.8 billion empire is easy compared to keeping the woman you love. And Victoria Thornfield? She was about to make the discovery that would not only explode her marriage, but reveal secrets that would change both their lives forever. This is the story of how a party became a nightmare, how arrogance transformed a visionary into a destroyed man, and how sometimes losing everything is the only path to finding what truly matters. If you enjoy stories about luxury, betrayal, revenge, and impossible redemption, you're in the right place. Like this video, subscribe to Revealed Riches, and prepare yourself for a 90-minute journey through the most hidden secrets of millionaires. Because tonight, we reveal riches and the ruins they leave behind. Marcus Thornfield wasn't born with a silver spoon. No. He was born in 1978 in a two-bedroom apartment in Queens, New York, the son of Polish immigrants. His father, Joseph, worked 14 hours a day at a packaging factory. His mother, Anna, cleaned houses for Manhattan's elite, the same mansions where years later Marcus would be invited as an equal. From childhood, Marcus was different. While other kids played basketball on cracked asphalt courts in Queens, he took apart old computers he found in the trash. At 12, he built his first website. At 15, he hacked the school's system to change his grades, not to cheat, but to prove he could. Marcus always knew he'd be rich, his mother would say years later in a Forbes interview. He told me when he was 10, "Mom, one day you'll stop cleaning their houses. You'll own your own house." And he kept that promise. In 1996, Marcus entered MIT on full scholarship, computer science. He didn't have the social charm of other students, didn't have the designer wardrobe, didn't have the imported car, but he had something more powerful, an unshakable obsession to win. There were years of cold coffee at 3 in the morning, codes that didn't work, projects that failed. But in 2000, at 22 years old, Marcus had the idea. It wasn't Facebook, it wasn't Twitter, it was something different. ConnectSphere. The vision was simple but revolutionary. A social network that didn't just connect people but predicted connections. Artificial intelligence algorithms that analyzed not only who you knew, but who you should know. For professional networking, for friendships, for romance. We don't connect people who already know each other, Marcus would say in his first investor pitch in 2002. We create the future of human relationships. The investors laughed at him. 27 pitches, 27 rejections. You're too young. The idea is too ambitious. Social networks are a passing fad. Come back when you have real experience. Marcus almost gave up. Almost. He was sleeping on a friend's couch in San Francisco, surviving on instant noodles and watered-down coffee. He had $240 in his bank account. His clothes were worn. His hopes nearly extinct. And then came Michael Chen. Chen was an angel investor, former Google executive, with a supernatural instinct for finding the next big success. He saw something in Marcus that others didn't, not just intelligence but hunger. The hunger of a kid from Queens who swore he'd never be poor again. Chen invested $500,000 in exchange for 20% of the company. It was enough. In 2004, ConnectSphere launched in beta. By 2006, it had 5 million users. By 2008, 50 million. By 2010, 200 million. And in 2012, when they went public, ConnectSphere was valued at $8.6 billion. Marcus Thornfield, at 34 years old, owned 32% of the shares. That made him the owner of a personal fortune of $2.75 billion. Overnight, the kid who ate instant noodles became the cover of Forbes, Time, Wired. The lone genius of Silicon Valley, the headline said. The man who reinvented how we connect. But here's the part the magazines didn't tell. Marcus was alone. Rich beyond imagination, globally famous, but deeply, painfully alone. He had assistants, lawyers, executives, but he had no friends, no close family. His parents had died in a car accident in 2009, months before the big success. No love, until the night of March 15, 2010, Miami, Florida, Art Basel, the most prestigious contemporary art fair in the Americas. Marcus was there not because he loved art. He could barely distinguish a Picasso from a Pollock, but because his PR consultant insisted, you need to be seen in the right places with the right people. The party was happening at the Fontainebleau Hotel penthouse. Ocean view, Cristal champagne flowing like water, famous DJs, models, artists, entrepreneurs, the cultural elite of two Americas conversing in English, Spanish, French. Marcus was bored. He held a champagne flute he didn't even want to drink, wearing an $8,000 Tom Ford tuxedo that made him feel uncomfortable, an imposter in his own success. And then he saw her, Victoria Castellano. She was on the other side of the terrace, laughing with a group of people Marcus didn't recognize. Blood-red Valentino dress that hugged her body with an elegance that seemed natural, not forced. Black hair falling in waves over her shoulders, tanned skin, brown eyes that, even from a distance, seemed to shine with sharp intelligence. Marcus learned later that Victoria was 28 years old that night, that she had modeled for Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Dior campaigns, that she was the daughter of a Brazilian diplomat and an Italian fashion designer, that she spoke 5 languages, that she had retired from the runway at 26 to study art history at Columbia. But in that moment, Marcus knew only one thing. He needed to meet her. For the first time in years, Marcus Thornfield felt fear. Not the fear of losing money or failing in business, that fear he had overcome, but the primitive, human fear of approaching someone who could reject him. He finished the champagne flute in one gulp, took a deep breath, and walked toward her. "Hi," he said, and immediately hated himself for the pathetic opening. Victoria turned, smiled politely, the kind of smile someone gives a stranger at a party. "Hello. I'm Marcus." Victoria. Silence. Marcus desperately searched for something clever to say, something that would impress her. His mind, which could solve complex algorithms in seconds, went completely blank. "Do you like art?" he finally asked, and internally cringed at the obviousness of the question at an art fair. Victoria laughed, not a mocking laugh, but genuine. "Depends. Are you trying to impress me, or do you really want to know?" Marcus blinked, disarmed by the direct honesty. "I really want to know." "Then yes, I love art. I studied art history. And you? Let me guess. You're here because your advisor said it's good for your image?" Marcus laughed, surprised. "How do you know?" "Because you're holding that champagne flute like it's a grenade about to explode. Your tuxedo looks too new, and you have the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else." "That obvious?" "To someone paying attention, yes." And then Victoria did something that changed everything. She extended her hand. "Come, I'll show you something." She led him inside the gallery, away from the noisy party, to a quieter room where a single painting was displayed. It was an abstract work, explosions of blue and gold on black canvas. "What do you see?" Victoria asked. Marcus looked at the painting. "Honestly, colors," Victoria smiled. "Most people would say something pretentious. I see the existential angst of modernity. But you were honest. I like that." They talked for 3 hours. Victoria told him about growing up traveling the world with her parents, about the loneliness of being beautiful but not being seen beyond beauty, about her dream of opening an art foundation for underprivileged children. Marcus told her about Queens, about the parents he lost, about the feeling of having everything and nothing at the same time. When the party ended, Marcus asked for her number. "Why should I give it to you?" Victoria asked, but there was playfulness in her voice. "Because..." Marcus paused. "Because I don't want this to be the last time I talk to the only person in Miami who isn't pretending to be someone they're not." Victoria studied him for a long moment. Then she took his phone and typed in her number. Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, not a Michelin-starred establishment, but a family-owned place where Victoria's grandmother used to take her when she visited New York. Marcus showed up in jeans and a sweater, grateful to be out of the tuxedo. Victoria wore a simple white dress and looked more beautiful than she had at the Art Basel party. They talked about everything. Marcus told her about the pressure of suddenly being worth billions, about board meetings where everyone agreed with him even when he was wrong, about the strange isolation that comes with extreme wealth. Victoria told him about the modeling industry, about being treated like a beautiful object, about the relief of walking away from it to pursue something that fed her soul instead of just her bank account. "Do you miss it?" Marcus asked. "The modeling?" Victoria considered this. "I miss the travel, I miss some of the people, but I don't miss being invisible while being stared at, if that makes sense." It did. Their second date was a week later. Marcus took her to the Museum of Modern Art after hours. He'd made a donation that secured them private access. They wandered through empty galleries, Victoria explaining the significance of pieces, Marcus asking questions that revealed his genuine curiosity despite his lack of formal art education. "You're not like other tech billionaires," Victoria said as they stood in front of a Rothko. "How so?" "You actually listen. Most powerful men I've met, they wait for you to stop talking so they can talk more about themselves. You ask questions. You want to learn." Marcus felt something unfamiliar. It took him a moment to recognize it as pride, not in his accomplishments, but in who he was as a person. By their fifth date, Marcus was in love. By their 10th, he was certain Victoria was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. By their 20th, on a beach in Malibu at sunset, he asked her to marry him. The ring was a flawless 5-carat diamond from Tiffany, set in platinum, $1.2 million. But what Victoria remembered most wasn't the ring. It was what Marcus said. "I've built an empire," he told her, on his knee in the sand, the Pacific Ocean crashing behind them. "I've made billions. I've been on magazine covers, and none of it meant anything until I met you. Marry me, Victoria. Not because I'm rich, not because I'm successful. Marry me because I'm better when I'm with you, and I want to spend the rest of my life becoming the man you see when you look at me." Victoria said yes. The wedding was in June 2011 at the Villa d'Este on Lake Como, Italy. 500 guests. Victoria's family flew in from Brazil, Italy, France. Marcus's remaining family, a handful of cousins, sat dwarfed by the crowd of tech executives, celebrities, and socialites. The ceremony cost $4.5 million, fireworks over the lake. A performance by Andrea Bocelli. Champagne that cost $12,000 per bottle. But in the photographs that Victoria would look at years later, when everything had fallen apart, she wouldn't remember the expensive details. She'd remember how Marcus looked at her when she walked down the aisle, like she was the only person in the world. The first year of marriage was bliss. They split their time between a penthouse in Manhattan and a beach house in Malibu. Marcus still worked obsessively. ConnectSphere was growing exponentially, but he made time. Date nights every Tuesday. Weekend trips to places Victoria wanted to explore. He attended her art gallery openings. She attended his board meetings. "You humanize me," Marcus told her one night in bed. "The board listens to you in a way they don't listen to me. You make me think about the human side of technology, not just the business side." Victoria had started working with ConnectSphere's philanthropic arm, directing donations toward arts education in underprivileged communities. It gave her purpose beyond being Mrs. Thornfield, and Marcus seemed genuinely proud of her work. But then, slowly, things began to change. It started small, a missed dinner because a meeting ran late, a forgotten anniversary of their first date, Marcus checking his phone during conversation. Nothing dramatic, just erosion, like water wearing down stone. By their second anniversary in 2013, ConnectSphere had 500 million users. Marcus's fortune had grown to $4.2 billion. They'd upgraded to a $45 million mansion in Malibu, 15,000 square feet, infinity pool, private beach, staff of 12. And Marcus began to change. The humble kid from Queens, the man who'd been grateful for Victoria's love, started to disappear. In his place emerged someone Victoria didn't recognize. Someone who sent back wine at restaurants not because it was bad, but because he could. Someone who snapped at assistants for minor mistakes. Someone who talked over people in meetings, certain that his ideas were always the best. "You're different," Victoria told him one night after a charity gala where he'd been particularly dismissive of the organizers. "Different how?" Marcus asked, barely looking up from his phone. "You treated those people like servants. They were volunteers raising money for children's hospitals, and you acted like they were wasting your time." "Victoria, I donated $500,000 to that event. I think I'm allowed to expect competence. It's not about the money, Marcus. It's about basic respect. Maybe if you built something from nothing like I did, you'd understand the value of efficiency. Victoria felt like she'd been slapped. Excuse me? Marcus looked up, seemed to realize what he'd said. I'm sorry. That came out wrong. I'm just stressed. The IPO expansion into Asia, the new algorithm launch. I have a lot on my plate, but the apology felt hollow. And it wasn't the last time Marcus would say something cutting, something that revealed a growing arrogance. By 2015, they'd acquired a Gulfstream G650 private jet, $65 million. A 400-foot yacht they named Golden Horizon, $250 million. Vacation homes in Aspen, Monaco, and the Maldives. Marcus's fortune had swelled to $6.8 billion. And with each billion, each new toy, each magazine cover calling him a genius, Marcus's ego grew. He started surrounding himself with people who only agreed with him. His childhood friend who dared to criticize a business decision, cut off. The executive who questioned his strategy, fired. The board member who suggested caution, replaced. Victoria watched the man she'd married disappear. The man who'd listened, who'd asked questions, who'd been humble despite his wealth, was gone. In his place was someone who believed his own press. Someone who thought money made him smarter than everyone else. Someone who measured worth in dollars and dismissed anyone with less. The parties got bigger. The guest lists more exclusive. The behavior more outrageous. At a New Year's Eve party in 2016 at their Malibu mansion, Marcus ordered $200,000 worth of champagne. Not because they needed it, but because he wanted to prove he could. He hired Beyoncé to perform for their 300 guests, $2 million for a 2-hour set. He gave away Rolex watches as party favors, $15,000 each. Victoria stood on the terrace watching the excess and felt profoundly alone. She was surrounded by people, famous people, powerful people, but she'd never felt more isolated. Quite a party, a voice said beside her. Victoria turned to see Isabella Blackstone, wife of real estate mogul Richard Blackstone. They'd met at several society events, had the kind of polite acquaintance that wealthy wives develop at charity galas. It's something, Victoria agreed. Isabella studied her. You look how I feel at Richard's parties, like you're watching from outside your own life. Victoria felt tears threaten but pushed them back. Is it always like this? Does the money always change them? Isabella sipped her champagne. In my experience, yes. The question is whether you stay and watch it happen or leave before you don't recognize yourself either. Victoria didn't respond, but the seed was planted. By 2018, Victoria had thrown herself into her philanthropic work. She'd established the Castellano Foundation, named after her mother's maiden name, dedicated to bringing arts education to underserved communities. She raised $50 million in the first year, opened art centers in 10 cities, employed hundreds of teachers. It gave her purpose. It gave her identity beyond being Marcus Thornfield's wife. But it also created distance. Marcus barely noticed her work. When she tried to tell him about a successful program launch, he'd nod absently while typing on his phone. When she invited him to a gallery opening featuring work by students from her program, he sent his assistant instead, too busy with a product launch. Don't you care about what I'm building? Victoria finally asked after he missed another important event. Of course I care, Marcus said, not looking up from his laptop. I'm proud of your little art project. Little art project? Victoria's voice was ice. We serve 50,000 children. We've raised $50 million. We're changing lives. With money I helped you raise through my connections, Marcus said. Let's be real, Victoria. Without my name, your foundation would be a fraction of the size. The words hung in the air like poison. Get out, Victoria said quietly. What? Get out of this room before I say something we can't take back. Marcus finally looked up, seemed to realize he'd crossed a line. Victoria, I didn't mean... Yes, you did. You meant every word. Now get out. He left. They didn't speak for 3 days. When they finally did, Marcus apologized, but the wound remained. Because Victoria knew he'd meant it. Knew that somewhere in his climb to billionaire status, Marcus had started to believe that money was the measure of all worth, that wealth equaled value, that his success made him superior. The Marcus Thornfield who'd knelt on a Malibu beach and said she made him better? That man was dead, and Victoria began to wonder if their marriage was too. But she stayed, out of love for who he'd been, out of hope he might return, out of fear of starting over. Out of pride, she'd married him in front of 500 people, announced to the world this was her person, and admitting failure felt impossible. She stayed through 2019, through 2020, through 2021. She stayed as Marcus got worse, as his arrogance calcified into cruelty, as his dismissiveness toward others extended even to her. She stayed until June 2023, until the yacht party that would destroy everything. Marcus's 45th birthday. He decided to celebrate not at one of their mansions, but on the Golden Horizon, the $250 million yacht currently docked in Monaco during the Grand Prix. "I want the biggest party anyone's ever seen," Marcus told his event planner. "I don't care what it costs. Make it legendary." The final bill? $5 million. They flew 400 guests to Monaco on chartered planes. They booked every room at the Hotel de Paris for the overflow. They hired 3 Michelin-starred chefs. They brought in Dom Perignon 1959 at $50,000 per bottle and ordered 100 bottles. They hired Daft Punk for a surprise reunion performance, $3 million. They had fireworks synchronized to music. They had ice sculptures that cost $100,000 each and melted by night's end. The guest list read like a who's who of global elite: tech CEOs, Hollywood actors, European royalty, supermodels, athletes, politicians. Anyone who mattered in Marcus's mind was there. Victoria wore a custom Elie Saab gown that cost $85,000, sapphire jewelry that cost $2 million. She looked stunning. She felt empty. The party started at 8 p.m. By 10 p.m., the yacht was packed. Music pulsed, champagne flowed, celebrities danced, guests posted Instagram photos that would be viewed by millions. Marcus was in his element, surrounded by admirers, telling stories, accepting birthday wishes, playing the role of conquering hero. Victoria smiled for photographs, made polite conversation, played the role of dutiful wife. Inside, she felt nothing. At 11:30 p.m., she went looking for Marcus to cut the birthday cake, a $40,000 creation from Paris, 7 tiers, topped with edible gold. She couldn't find him on the main deck. Not on the upper deck where the VIPs congregated. Not in the dining area. "Have you seen Marcus?" she asked James, his personal assistant. "I think he went down to the master cabin, Mrs. Thornfield. Said he needed to take a call." Victoria nodded, headed down the stairs toward their private cabin. The music faded as she descended. The corridor was quiet, empty, dimly lit. She approached the door to the master cabin and heard voices inside, a woman's laugh. Marcus's voice, low and intimate. Victoria's hand froze on the door handle. Her heart pounded. Every instinct screamed to turn around, to not open that door, to preserve the illusion just a little longer. But she'd been living in illusion for too long. She opened the door. Marcus was on the bed, his shirt unbuttoned. Lauren Hayes, his 26-year-old executive assistant, was straddling him, her dress pushed up around her thighs. They sprang apart when the door opened. The world seemed to slow down. Victoria saw every detail with horrible clarity. The smudged lipstick on Marcus's collar. The champagne glasses on the nightstand. Lauren's shoes kicked off by the door. The guilty expression on Marcus's face transforming from shock to something else, something defensive. "Victoria," Marcus said, standing up quickly, buttoning his shirt. "This isn't what it looks like." Victoria heard herself laugh, a sound she didn't recognize, brittle and sharp. "Really? What does it look like, Marcus?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my husband is fucking his assistant on our bed during his birthday party while 400 guests drink $50,000 champagne upstairs." Lauren scrambled off the bed, smoothing her dress, her face flushed with shame or excitement. Victoria couldn't tell and didn't care. "Mrs. Thornfield, I'm so sorry. I didn't," Lauren stammered. "Get out," Victoria said, her voice eerily calm. "Victoria, let me explain," Marcus started. "I said get out," Victoria's voice rose. "Not you, Marcus. You stay. Lauren, get the hell off this yacht before I throw you overboard myself." Lauren grabbed her shoes and fled, leaving Marcus and Victoria alone in the cabin. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. "How long?" Victoria finally asked. "Victoria, please. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. How long have you been sleeping with her?" Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Victoria had once found endearing. Now it just looked pathetic. 6 months. Maybe 7. I don't know. It just happened. It just happened, Victoria repeated. You just accidentally tripped and fell into bed with a 26-year-old. 7 months. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Marcus said, and Victoria saw a flash of the arrogance that had been growing in him for years. Running a company worth $30 billion, managing thousands of employees, the board constantly demanding more growth, more innovation. I needed something. Someone who didn't judge me, who didn't make me feel like I was failing. So you're making this my fault, Victoria said, her calm cracking. I made you cheat by having expectations that you be a decent human being. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Marcus? Please explain to me how this is anything other than you being a selfish, arrogant asshole who thinks his money and success entitle him to do whatever he wants. Don't talk to me like that. Marcus's voice hardened. I've given you everything. This yacht, the mansions, the jewelry, the lifestyle, you wanted for nothing. I wanted a husband, Victoria screamed, all composure gone. I wanted the man I married, not this narcissistic stranger who measures love in dollars and thinks he can buy his way out of being a decent person. You knew who I was when you married me. No, I knew who you pretended to be. The humble kid from Queens who was grateful for success. That man is dead. You killed him with every private jet, every yacht, every time you treated someone like garbage because you could, because you're Marcus Thornfield, and you're worth billions, and that makes you special. I am special, Marcus shouted. I built something from nothing. I changed the world. I deserve to be treated like I'm special. Victoria stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time in years. You're right. You built something incredible, and you let it destroy who you were. The money didn't change you, Marcus. It revealed you, showed what you'd become when there were no limits, no one to tell you no. And what you became is someone I don't recognize, someone I don't love. The words hung between them. Marcus's face went pale. You don't mean that. I do. Victoria pulled off her wedding rings, the $1.2 million engagement ring, the platinum band they'd exchanged at Lake Como. She set them on the dresser. I want a divorce. Victoria, wait, we can work through this. I'll end it with Lauren. We can go to counseling. It's not about Lauren, Victoria said, suddenly tired. She's a symptom, not the disease. The disease is what you've become, and I can't watch it anymore. I can't be part of it anymore. She turned to leave. If you walk out that door, I'll destroy you in the divorce, Marcus said, his voice cold now, the businessman negotiating. You signed a prenup. You'll get nothing. You'll go from living like a queen to being nobody. Victoria looked back at him. I'd rather be nobody than be married to who you are now. She walked out. Up the stairs. Through the party where people were still dancing, still drinking, still celebrating, oblivious to the fact that everything had just shattered. She found James, Marcus's assistant. I need the helicopter. Mrs. Thornfield, I'm not authorized. Call it, James, now. Or I walk up to that DJ booth and tell these 400 people exactly what your boss is doing on his birthday. James made the call. 15 minutes later, Victoria was in a helicopter lifting off from the yacht's helipad. Below, she could see the golden horizon, lit up like a floating palace. Fireworks starting for the midnight celebration of Marcus's birth. She didn't cry. Not yet. She felt numb, empty, like she'd been hollowed out. The helicopter took her to Nice Airport where where the Gulf Stream was waiting. She ordered the pilots to take her to New York. They tried to call Marcus for authorization. She told them if they didn't take off in 10 minutes, she'd make sure they never worked in aviation again. They took off. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Victoria finally cried. Not for Marcus, not for the marriage, but for the girl who'd met a lonely billionaire at an art fair and believed she could save him from his own success. That girl had been naive. That girl was gone. By the time Victoria landed in New York, the story had broken. TMZ had it first. Tech billionaire Marcus Thornfield caught cheating at $5 million yacht party. Wife flees in helicopter. There were photos. Somehow the paparazzi always found a way. Photos of Lauren leaving the yacht looking disheveled. Photos of Marcus on the deck looking panicked. Photos of Victoria in the helicopter, her face a mask of pain. The internet exploded. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Ironically enough, Connexsphere itself, everyone had an opinion. Team Victoria, Team Marcus. Think pieces about billionaire marriages, memes about the yacht party. It was a feeding frenzy. Victoria went to ground in her mother's apartment in São Paulo. She hired Robert Klein, the most vicious divorce attorney in New York, a man famous for destroying powerful men who'd underestimated their wives. The prenup is tight, Klein told her in their first meeting. You get $10 million flat plus the Manhattan penthouse. That's it. No percentage of his fortune. No claim to Connexsphere shares. Marcus's lawyers made sure of that. I don't care about the money, Victoria said. You should, Klein said, because he's going to make this ugly. Men like Marcus Thornfield don't lose gracefully. They burn everything down rather than admit fault. He was right. Marcus's legal team came out swinging. They painted Victoria as a gold digger who'd married for money. They claimed she'd been having her own affairs, fabricated evidence, paid witnesses to lie. They leaked stories to the press about Victoria being difficult, demanding, emotionally unstable. Marcus went on CNBC 3 weeks after the yacht party. I'm deeply sorry for my mistakes, he said, looking contrite for the camera. My marriage to Victoria broke down long before that night. We grew apart. I made poor choices, but I'm committed to learning from this and becoming better. He didn't mention that he'd moved Lauren into the Malibu mansion 2 days after Victoria left. That detail leaked anyway, housekeeping staff selling stories to tabloids. The divorce proceedings began in August 2023. What should have been simple, the prenup was clear, became warfare. Marcus contested every asset, claimed Victoria had hidden money, demanded she return gifts he'd given her during the marriage, jewelry worth millions. I bought those for her, they're mine, Marcus argued in a deposition. Gifts become property of the recipient, Klein countered. But please tell the judge you want to take back birthday presents. It'll play great. But the real damage was happening to Marcus's empire. Connexsphere's stock dropped 18% after the scandal broke. Advertisers pulled back. User growth slowed. The board was furious. You're a liability, the board chairman Robert Hastings told Marcus in an emergency meeting. Your personal life is affecting the company's valuation. It'll blow over, Marcus insisted. Scandals always do. Not when you keep making it worse, Hastings said. Moving your mistress into your house 2 days after your wife leaves. Giving interviews where you come across as an arrogant prick. Marcus, I've known you for 15 years. You used to be smart. What happened? Marcus fired Hastings the next day. It was a catastrophic mistake. Hastings owned 8% of Connexsphere. He was respected on Wall Street. His firing sent shockwaves through the investment community. More board members resigned. Institutional investors started dumping stock. By October 2023, Connexsphere had lost $8 billion in market value. And Marcus's personal fortune? It had shrunk from $6.8 billion to $5.4 billion. Still obscenely wealthy, but the trajectory was downward. The divorce trial began in November 2023. It was supposed to be private, but leaks were constant. Every ugly detail made headlines. Victoria's lawyers revealed Marcus's offshore accounts, hidden money in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore. $300 million that hadn't been disclosed in the prenup negotiation. You lied about your assets when we signed the prenup, Klein argued in court. That invalidates the agreement. Marcus's lawyers claimed the offshore money was for business purposes, perfectly legal. Legal and ethical are different things, the judge, Helen Whitmore, noted dryly. Mr. Thornfield, you hid $300 million from your wife before marriage. Why should this court believe anything in your prenup was negotiated in good faith? Marcus made his second catastrophic mistake. He lost his temper in court. She knew I was rich when she married me, he shouted at Judge Whitmore. She wanted the lifestyle. Now she wants to pretend she's some victim. She lived in a $45 million mansion. She wore $2 million in jewelry. She flew private everywhere. And now she wants to act like I'm the bad guy. Missed. "Thornfield," Judge Whitmore said, her voice like ice. "You will lower your voice in my courtroom, or I will hold you in contempt. Your wealth is not in question. Your character is. And right now, you're not helping your case." But Marcus couldn't stop. "This is theft. She's trying to rob me because I was successful. Because I built an empire. Well, I'm not giving her a damn penny more than the prenup says." Judge Whitmore looked at him for a long moment. "We'll see about that." Court adjourned. The legal team left the courthouse knowing they'd lost ground. Marcus's arrogance had offended the one person who would decide his fate. But worse was coming. In December 2023, an investigative reporter from the Wall Street Journal published a devastating piece. "The Fall of ConnectSphere: How Marcus Thornfield's Personal Chaos is Destroying a Tech Giant." The article detailed everything: the firing of competent executives who'd questioned Marcus, the hiring of yes-men who only told him what he wanted to hear, the risky expansion into China that was hemorrhaging money, the new algorithm that didn't work but Marcus had insisted on launching anyway, the toxic work culture where employees were afraid to bring bad news. Marcus Thornfield used to be a visionary, the article concluded. Now he's a cautionary tale about what happens when you start believing your own hype. When you think being rich makes you right. When you surround yourself with people who won't tell you the truth. ConnectSphere is crumbling not because of market forces, but because its founder has lost the very qualities that made him successful in the first place: humility, curiosity, and the ability to listen. The article went viral. ConnectSphere stock dropped another 12%. Competitors smelled blood in the water. By January 2024, Marcus had lost over $800 million in personal wealth. ConnectSphere was in crisis, and the divorce was still grinding through the courts. Lauren, the assistant he'd thrown away his marriage for, she left him in February, selling her story to People magazine for $500,000. Life with Marcus Thornfield: The Truth Behind the Billion-Dollar Facade. She described his paranoia, his mood swings, his increasing isolation. She described how he'd check ConnectSphere's stock price dozens of times a day, growing more agitated with each drop. How he'd rant about Victoria, about the board, about journalists, convinced everyone was conspiring against him. "He's not the genius everyone thinks he is," Lauren said in the interview. "He's a deeply insecure man who built a wall of money around himself and convinced himself that made him special. But when that wall started cracking, there was nothing underneath. No real relationships, no self-awareness, just ego and emptiness." Marcus tried to sue her for breach of confidentiality. His lawyers advised against it, said it would only make things worse. He did it anyway. The lawsuit was dismissed, and the attempt made him look even more petty and vindictive. By March 2024, Marcus Thornfield had become a pariah in Silicon Valley. The visionary was now the villain. The success story was now a cautionary tale. He sat alone in the Malibu mansion, the same mansion where he'd hosted parties for hundreds, and counted his losses. His fortune, down to $4.6 billion. His company, in free fall. His reputation, destroyed. His marriage, over. And then, in April 2024, the financial disclosure from Victoria's legal team dropped a bomb that changed everything. Hidden in hundreds of pages of documents was a revelation so stunning that it made the front page of every major newspaper. Victoria Castellano Thornfield wasn't just a philanthropist living off her husband's money. She was the secret founder and primary investor in Castellano Ventures, a venture capital firm that had invested in 47 tech startups over the previous 8 years. And those startups? They were currently valued at a combined $3.8 billion. Victoria had built her own empire. Quietly. Strategic. While everyone, including Marcus, had dismissed her as just another rich wife playing at philanthropy. The portfolio was staggering. She'd invested early in companies that became unicorns. She'd identified trends before they exploded. She'd used the connections from her modeling years, her art world contacts, her natural intelligence that everyone had underestimated. And she'd done it all with money from her modeling career and inheritance from her mother, not a penny from Marcus. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Victoria didn't need his money. She'd never needed his money. She could walk away with just the $10 million from the prenup and still be worth nearly $4 billion. Marcus called her for the first time since the yacht party. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked when she answered. "You never asked," Victoria said simply. In 12 years of marriage, You never once asked what I did with my own money. You assumed I was spending yours. You assumed I needed yours. You assumed I was nothing without you. I would have been proud of you. No, you would have felt threatened. You needed me to be smaller than you, Marcus. That's what your ego required. A beautiful wife who made you look good and didn't challenge your supremacy. That's not fair, isn't it? How many times did I try to tell you about my investments and you changed the subject back to ConnectSphere? How many times did I invite you to meet the founders I was working with and you were too busy? You didn't want a partner, Marcus. You wanted an ornament. The line went quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, Marcus finally said, and for the first time in years, he sounded like the man she'd married. I'm so sorry for what I became. I know, Victoria said. But sorry doesn't change anything. The divorce will be final in 2 weeks. You'll give me what the prenup says. I don't want your money. I never did. What did you want? I wanted you to stay the man I fell in love with. But he's gone, and I don't think he's coming back. She hung up. The divorce was finalized on April 28, 2024. Victoria got her $10 million in the Manhattan penthouse. Marcus kept everything else. Legally, he won. But everyone knew he'd lost everything that mattered. The months after the divorce were the darkest of Marcus Thornfield's life. And that's saying something for a man who'd once slept on a couch eating instant noodles. Because being poor when you're nobody is one thing. Being exposed, humiliated, and alone when you're supposed to be on top of the world, that's a different kind of hell. ConnectSphere continued to hemorrhage value. By June 2024, the company Marcus had built from nothing was worth $11 billion, down from a peak of $38 billion. His personal stake had shrunk to $2.1 billion. Still unfathomably wealthy by any normal measure, but for Marcus, it felt like poverty. The board finally had enough. In July 2024, they voted him out as CEO. Marcus Thornfield, founder and visionary, was removed from his own company. This is for the good of ConnectSphere, the new board chairman said in a press release. We're grateful for Marcus's contributions, but the company needs new leadership to navigate current challenges. Translation: You're toxic, and you're killing us. Marcus fought it, threatened lawsuits, called in favors, but he'd burned too many bridges. The people who might have stood by him had all been fired, insulted, or pushed away during his years of arrogance. He was alone. The Malibu mansion felt like a mausoleum. $45 million of empty rooms that echoed with his footsteps. The staff had quit, unwilling to work for someone who'd become famous for mistreating employees. The friends who used to fill the place with parties had moved on to the next billionaire, the next source of free champagne and reflected glory. Marcus would wake up at noon, wander the empty house, check ConnectSphere's stock price obsessively, drink expensive scotch, and fall asleep watching the sun set over an ocean he no longer appreciated. He was living the dream he'd spent his whole life chasing, and it meant nothing. In August 2024, his accountant came to him with devastating news. The IRS is auditing those offshore accounts, Gerald Shapiro said, the ones that came out in the divorce. They're claiming you owe $180 million in back taxes and penalties. That's impossible. Those accounts were legal. Legal to have, not legal to hide from the IRS. Marcus, you're in serious trouble. If they pursue this fully, you could face criminal charges. For the first time, Marcus felt real fear. Not fear of losing money, but fear of losing freedom. Being not just humiliated, but destroyed. What do I do? Pay them. Settle. And for God's sake, stop making enemies. Every interview where you come across as an arrogant asshole, every lawsuit you file, every time you open your mouth, you make it worse. Marcus paid. The IRS took $180 million. His fortune was now down to $1.9 billion. Still rich, still in the 3 comma club, but falling fast. In September 2024, he had to sell the yacht. The Golden Horizon, the site of his greatest humiliation, went for $190 million, a $60 million loss from what he'd paid. The Malibu mansion followed in October, $38 million, another loss. The Aspen house, the Monaco apartment, the private jet, one by one, his toys were liquidated. Not because he was broke, but because maintaining them cost millions a year, and his income had dried up. ConnectSphere was paying him nothing now that he'd been ousted. His investments were underwater. He was asset rich but cash poor. The worst position for someone who'd built an identity on visible wealth. By November 2024, Marcus was living in a hotel, not a luxury suite, though he could have afforded it, but a simple room at the Four Seasons in San Francisco, because he couldn't bear to stay in any of the cities where he'd been king. He was 46 years old, worth about $1.4 billion after all the sales and taxes, and completely, utterly lost. One night, drunk on a $3,000 bottle of scotch that tasted like ash, Marcus Googled Victoria. She'd stayed out of the spotlight after the divorce. No interviews, no social media gloating, nothing. She'd simply disappeared from public view, but her work spoke for itself. Castellano Ventures had just led a $200 million funding round for a sustainable energy startup. Her art foundation had expanded to 30 cities. She'd been named to Fortune's most powerful women in business list. She was thriving, building, creating, and he was sitting alone in a hotel room, drinking himself into oblivion. Marcus looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. He'd aged a decade in 2 years. Gray hair, lines around his eyes, the face of a man who'd won everything and lost what mattered. "What happened to you?" he asked his reflection. The man in the mirror had no answer. It was his father's voice that came to him then, a memory from childhood. Joseph Thornfield had died before seeing his son become a billionaire. But Marcus remembered something he'd said when Marcus was 16, angry about being poor, about their small apartment, about not having what the rich kids had. "Money doesn't make you better than anyone, Marcus," his father had said in his thick Polish accent. "It just makes you more of what you already are. If you're good inside, money helps you do good things. If you're bad inside, money helps you do bad things. The money itself? It's just paper and numbers. What matters is who you are when nobody's watching." Who was Marcus Thornfield when nobody was watching? A man who'd become everything he'd once despised, who'd treated people like servants, who'd measured worth in dollars, who'd thrown away love for ego. For the first time in years, Marcus cried, not tears of self-pity, but tears of genuine shame. The next morning, hungover and exhausted, Marcus did something he hadn't done in months. He went for a walk. Not in a luxury car, not with assistance and security. Just walked. Through the streets of San Francisco, anonymous in jeans and a hoodie, nobody recognizing the man who'd once been on every magazine cover. He walked past homeless people camped on sidewalks, past working families struggling to make rent in one of the world's most expensive cities, past immigrants working food carts, just like his parents had worked their whole lives. And he realized something that should have been obvious. His billions hadn't made him special, made him lucky. Lucky to have the intelligence to build something valuable, lucky to have the opportunity to attend MIT, lucky to meet the right investor at the right time, lucky to be born in a country where a poor kid could become rich. But that luck had convinced him he was superior, that he deserved worship, that rules didn't apply to him. The money hadn't corrupted him. His interpretation of what the money meant had corrupted him. Marcus found himself at a small coffee shop in the Mission District, not the kind of place a billionaire would go, just a neighborhood spot with $3 drip coffee and mismatched chairs. He ordered a coffee, sat down, and for the first time in a decade, nobody knew who he was. Nobody wanted anything from him. Nobody was impressed or intimidated. He was just another guy drinking coffee. And it felt like free. The woman next to him was working on a laptop, clearly stressed, running hands through her hair, muttering about code that wouldn't compile. "You a developer?" Marcus asked. She looked up, surprised. "Trying to be. Freelance. This client is killing me with changes." "What language?" "Python. The architecture is a mess." They talked for 20 minutes. Marcus didn't tell her who he was, didn't drop his credentials, just offered suggestions, debugged her code, helped her solve the problem. "Oh my God, thank you," she said when it finally worked. "I've been stuck on that for 3 days. You just saved my contract. Happy to help. You must be a developer too?" "Used to be, long time ago." She smiled, went back to her work, and Marcus realized something profound. That 20-minute conversation, helping a stranger solve a coding problem, had brought him more genuine satisfaction than any billion-dollar deal he'd made in the past 5 years. He'd forgotten the joy of creation, of solving problems, of help. He'd become so obsessed with building an empire that he'd forgotten why he'd started in the first place, because he loved making things work. That night, Marcus started coding again, not for ConnectSphere, not for money, just for... He built a small app, something simple, a tool for nonprofit organizations to manage volunteers. He worked through the night, fingers flying over keys, mind fully engaged for the first time in years. When the sun came up, he had a working prototype. It wasn't worth billions. It probably wasn't worth anything commercially. But he'd built it, and it worked, and it might help people. And that felt better than any yacht had ever felt. Over the next month, Marcus started rebuilding. Not his fortune, that was almost accidental. But he attended AA meetings, not because he was an alcoholic, but because he needed to hear stories of people who'd lost everything and found themselves again. He volunteered at a coding boot camp for underprivileged kids, teaching them the skills that had changed his life. He donated anonymously to causes he believed in, not for tax breaks or publicity, but because it was right. He called people he'd wronged and apologized. Some hung up on him, some accepted, some needed more time. He didn't demand forgiveness, just offered genuine contrition. And he started therapy. Real therapy, not the executive coaching bullshit, but actual psychological help to understand how he'd become someone he hated. "You're not unique," his therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, told him in their third session. "Lots of successful people struggle with this. They achieve something great, and then they start believing their success in one area makes them superior in all areas. That's called domain confusion. You were brilliant at building social networks. That didn't make you brilliant at being human. So what do I do? You already started. You recognize the problem. You're doing the work. Now you just have to keep doing it, even when it's hard, even when your ego tells you you're special and don't need to change." In December 2024, ConnectSphere's new CEO, Elena Rodriguez, reached out to Marcus. "We want to bring you back as a technical advisor," she said over lunch. "Not running the company, but helping with product development. You built something incredible, Marcus. The company needs that vision, just not the ego that came with it. I don't know if I'm ready. Neither do I. But I'm willing to take a chance if you are. With conditions. You report to me. You don't undermine my decisions. You treat every employee with respect, from interns to executives. You check your ego at the door. Can you do that?" Marcus thought about it. The old Marcus would have been insulted at the conditions, at reporting to someone else in the company he'd founded. The new Marcus. "Yes, I can do that. Thank you for the chance." He started in January 2025, 2 years after the yacht party. His office was small, nothing like the executive suite he'd once occupied. His title was Senior Technical Advisor. He had no direct reports. He coded, advised, contributed, and went home at reasonable hours. And for the first time in a decade, he was happy at work. ConnectSphere started to stabilize. Marcus's contributions were valuable, but more importantly, they were collaborative. He listened to other engineers, accepted feedback, admitted when he was wrong. "You're different," Elena told him after 6 months. "Whatever happened to you, keep doing it." By June 2025, Marcus had saved about $800 million from the wreckage of his empire. Not billions, but still wealthy beyond normal measure. He'd bought a modest house in Berkeley, 2,500 square feet, no ocean view, no staff quarters, just a home. He drove a Tesla Model S, not because it was the cheapest car he could afford, but because it was practical and he didn't need to prove anything anymore. He dated occasionally, but nothing serious. He wasn't ready. Maybe wouldn't be for a long time. But there was one thing he needed to do. One person he needed to see. In August 2025, Marcus sent Victoria an email. "I know I have no right to ask for your time. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm speaking at a tech conference in New York next month, talking about failure and rebuilding. I'd like to see you after if you're willing. Not to ask for anything, just to say something I should have said 2 years ago. If you don't want to, I understand." He hit send and waited. 3 days later, Victoria replied, "September 15th, 3 p.m., the coffee shop near the gallery where you proposed to me. Don't be late." Marcus wasn't late. He arrived 15 minutes early, ordered a black coffee, and waited. Victoria walked in at exactly 3 p.m. She looked beautiful, but then she'd always looked What was different was the confidence in her bearing. She'd always been poised, but there was a new strength there, the walk of someone who'd been tested and... "Hi," Marcus said, standing. "Hi," Victoria replied, sitting across from him. Silence. 2 years of pain and growth between them. "You look good," Marcus finally said. "Happy." "I am. You look different. Healthier. I've been working on it. Therapy, sobriety, actually being a human being instead of a walking ego." Victoria smiled slightly. "I heard you're back at ConnectSphere as a technical advisor. Elena's been amazing. She gave me a chance I didn't deserve. Everyone deserves a second chance if they do the work to earn it." Marcus took a breath. "I'm not here to ask for anything from you, Victoria. Not reconciliation, not friendship. I just needed you to hear something from me directly, not through lawyers or press release. I'm listening. You were right about everything. Everything you said the night you left. Every accusation you made in the divorce. Every criticism. You were right. I became a monster. The money didn't make me one. I did that. I took all the privilege and opportunity I'd been given, and I used it to become someone cruel and arrogant and selfish. I destroyed the best thing in my life because my ego convinced me I was special, and you were lucky to be with me. When the truth is, I was lucky. Every single day I was married to you, I was lucky. And I threw it away." Victoria's eyes were wet, but she didn't speak. "I'm not the same person," Marcus continued. "I don't know if I'm better, but I'm trying, every day, to be someone who deserves the success he had, instead of someone who uses it as a weapon, to treat people with respect, to remember where I came from and what matters. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserved a husband who valued you for who you are, not what you represented. You deserved a partner, not a tyrant. You deserved love, not ownership. And I failed you in every possible way. I'm sorry, Victoria. I'm so profoundly sorry for what I did to..." A tear rolled down Victoria's cheek. "Do you know what the worst part was? Not the cheating, not the arrogance. It was watching you disappear. Watching the man I loved become someone I didn't recognize, and knowing I couldn't save you from... You tried. I didn't listen. No, you did." They sat in silence, drinking coffee. Two people who'd shared everything and now shared only memories. "I forgive you," Victoria finally said. Marcus looked up, surprised. "Not because you deserve it," she continued, "but because holding on to anger was poisoning me. Because I see that you're actually trying to change, and that takes courage. Because the Marcus I married, the one I fell in love with, is in there somewhere. And maybe you're finding him again." "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "But Marcus, we're not getting back together. That's not what this is." "I know. We broke for good reasons, and I'm happy now. I've built something that's mine. I'm with someone who treats me as an equal." Marcus felt a pang, but it was fair. "I'm glad. You deserve happiness. So do you. The real kind, not the kind money buys." "I hope you find it." They talked for another hour, about her ventures, his work at ConnectSphere, the lives they were building separately. It was bittersweet, but it was healing. When they said goodbye outside the coffee shop, Victoria hugged him. "Take care of yourself, Mark. You too." He watched her walk away, the woman who'd been his wife, his partner, his greatest love and greatest loss. And he felt something unexpected. Peace. Not happiness, not closure, but acceptance. He'd lost her, he'd deserved to lose her, and she'd moved on. That was okay. That was... What mattered now was what he did next. Marcus Thornfield went back to Berkeley, to his modest house, to his work, to the slow, unglamorous process of becoming a better person. The tech conference speech he gave in September 2025 was unlike any billionaire talk before it. He didn't brag about success. He talked about failure, about losing himself in wealth, about the loneliness of having everything and nothing, about the hard work of rebuilding not fortune but character. The speech went viral, not because it was inspirational in the usual way, but because it was brutal, self-aware. "I had $6.8 billion, Marcus said to the audience of entrepreneurs and tech workers. I had mansions, yachts, private jets. I had fame, power, respect. And I was the most miserable person I knew, because I'd forgotten the most important lesson. Money amplifies who you are. If you're good, it amplifies your ability to do good. If you're broken, it amplifies your broken. I was broken, and the billions just made the breaking loud. He paused, looking out at the... Someone asked me yesterday if I'd do anything differently if I could go back. Of course I would. I'd stay humble. I'd value people over pride. I'd remember that my worth isn't my net worth. But I can't go back. None of us can. All we can do is learn and try to be better going forward. So if you're building something, anything, whether it's a startup or a marriage or a life, remember this. Success will test you. It will show you who you really are when all limitations are removed. Make sure you're someone you can be proud of when that test comes. Because money can buy almost anything, except integrity. That you have to build yourself, one choice at a time. The audience gave him a standing ovation, not for what he'd built, but for what he'd admitted and what he was trying to reach. In the months that followed, Marcus continued his quiet life. He helped ConnectSphere launch new features. He mentored young entrepreneurs, teaching them coding and warning them about ego. He donated millions to causes that mattered, anonymously, no press releases, no tax breaks. He went on dates, a few serious, most not. He was honest with everyone. He was a work in progress, someone rebuilding from wreckage, not ready for forever, but open to connect. He called his few remaining family members, cousins he'd neglected during his billionaire years, and rebuilt those relationships. He learned to cook, to garden, to find joy in small things. And every morning, he looked in the mirror and asked himself the same question. Are you someone your parents would be proud of? Not for what you've achieved, but for who you are. Most days, the answer was, not yet, but I'm trying. Some days, the answer was, maybe. That was progress. By December 2025, Marcus Thornfield was 47 years old. His fortune had stabilized at about $1.2 billion, enough to never worry about money again, but far from the peak. ConnectSphere was thriving under new leadership, worth $28 billion, recovering from the chaos he'd caused. He was still a significant shareholder, still involved but no longer running things, and that was okay. He spent Christmas alone in Berkeley, not because he had no invitations, but because he needed the quiet. He cooked a small dinner, watched old movies, called the few people who mattered. And he thought about Victoria, about the yacht party 3 years ago that had been the beginning of the end, about the journey from arrogance to humiliation to, hopefully, wisdom. The yacht was gone. The mansions were gone. The empire was diminished. The marriage was over. But Marcus Thornfield was still here, still breathing, still trying. And in the end, that was the only wealth that mattered. Not what you had, but who you became with what you were. He didn't know if there would be another chance to build something that mattered. But he knew one thing. If those chances came, he'd be ready. Not as the arrogant billionaire who thought money made him special, but as a man who'd learned that character is the only currency that retains value when everything else falls apart. The kid from Queens had built an empire and lost. The man in Berkeley was building something harder, a life of meaning beyond the balance sheet. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real success story all along. This is Revealed Riches, where we don't just tell stories about wealth. We reveal what wealth reveals about us. Who we become when we have everything, who we are when we lose it, and who we choose to be when we get a second chance. Thank you for joining me on this 90-minute journey through the rise, fall, and rebuilding of Marcus Thornfield. If this story resonated with you, like this video, subscribe to Revealed Riches for more stories about the hidden costs of luxury and the hard work of redemption. Next time on Revealed Riches, the penthouse. When Richard Blackstone publicly humiliates his wife Isabella at a charity gala, she serves him divorce papers at his next board meeting. But the twist? Isabella was hiding her own secrets. Secrets that will turn a billionaire's world upside down. Until then, remember, riches can be revealed in a moment. But character? That takes a lifetime to build. And it's the only investment that always pays dividends. I'm your narrator, and this has been Revealed. See you next time.